Welcome to Colorado State University's podcast, The Audit, where host Stacy Nick talks with CSU faculty about topics ranging from their latest research to current events.
Years ago, the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons was created, and despite some initial controversies, it has endured to become a beloved pastime and cultural touchstone for many. But for Colorado State University political science instructor James Pigeon Fielder, it's much more than that. To Fielder, D&D, as it's more commonly known, is a masterclass in political strategy. Everything from diplomacy to alliance forming to conflict resolution. Today, I'm talking with Fielder about what a fantasy game filled with sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards can teach our political leaders and how it might benefit them and us if they started to wage a very different kind of campaign. The big overarching question, I think, is how do politics and Dungeons and Dragons translate? How do they – what can we learn from a game that's been around for 50 years about the political situation we're in today?
Right. So the two big concepts I use to frame games are the magic circle and symbolic correspondence. That will dovetail into two other key points in describing the politics of the world. So the first, the magic circle, the term was created by the Dutch cultural historian Johan Huizinga in his seminal work, Man the Player, Homo Ludens, in 1938. And the idea of the magic circle is games are similar to a ritual performance, where when the players are inside the game space, and it could literally be a circle like the table we're at now, or it could be a football field, a baseball field, a card table, playing dominoes. Everything inside the game is what's real to the players. So players are willing to believe all sorts of strange rules and world events that once they're outside of the circle might make no sense whatsoever. But what makes us so powerful is in the game, because of this effect, risk feels real. So when they feel like they're facing a risk in the game, like in Dungeons and Dragons, finally facing the titular dragon, and they conquer the dragon, working together as a team to do so, when they come out of the game, it's like, oh my goodness, we actually killed a dragon. And they remember that for years, maybe even decades after. And sociologist Dr. Gary Fine noted in his work, Shared Fantasy, studying role-playing gamers, that they could remember games decades later with crystal clear clarity because of this effect.
Wow.
Down to what people were eating and what people were wearing at the table. And then they couldn't remember what they had to eat a week prior. So that's the first term, the magic circle. Again, you're now inside this performative space where everything feels real. The second term, symbolic correspondence, is the idea, this also comes from ritual, in that you're in a ritual performance where the ritual leader coming from animist religion might be wearing the mask of an animal and the skin of an animal or the mask of a spirit. The idea is that similar to a magic circle, the ritual participants watching this, they're not pretending that they're with a god or an animal. They believe that the ritual leader is a god or an animal. And so it becomes a miniature rite of passage that transforms them in some way when they come back out. Now, the modern cynic might say, well, we don't really have animist religion and people wearing this skins of animals. And I would say, well, if you're wearing a suit to go to work, you're wearing the skin of a business person. I was in the military for 25 years, putting on the uniform. I'm wearing the skin of a sergeant or a lieutenant colonel. This process allows players then to put on identity of a character in the game. So perhaps the character wants to explore playing a different gender or playing a different alignment. Like, I'm always good, so maybe I can be evil in the game. Or even playing a completely different type of creature, like an elf or a dwarf. And while they're wearing it, everything they learn about that character becomes part of the player. And if debriefed correctly at the end of the game, just like professional games, a good entertainment game should also be debriefed, they leave their negative experiences behind, but everything good, transformative that they felt playing that character leaves with them when they come out of the game, and it changes them in some way. So taking those two ideas then leads into, particularly in Dungeons & Dragons, the relationship between agency and power. A role-playing game gives players agency, at least a good one does. The sense that if I make a decision in this game, it actually changes the world in some way, starting at very low level where I conquer one goblin or save one cat. That means that's one less goblin in the world. No offense to goblins or anything. And the family who wanted the cat back is happy. And now I can experience and see the dungeon master describing, oh, the family is so happy you've returned their cat. And it now makes both the character and the player feel good. Like, I made a real difference. Well, then their power starts to increase. And I would argue that power in Dungeons and Dragons starts linear up to maybe level 5 or level 6, and then becomes exponential up to level 20. So they're starting saving cats. By level 20, they are a universe-shaking power. Like, they're one of the most powerful beings in existence.
So kind of like starting with, like if you were relaying this to politics, starting with city council and going to president or...
Yes. That'd be a good way of looking at it. Or I even say at level 1, they're starting as an active voter.
Oh, yeah.
And then, my vote made a difference, or my participation in the local political process made a difference. And now before you know it, I'm president of the United States. I've reached level 20. And then with agency is the idea of working with power. So now players are practicing, I have power. What do I do with this power? Again, very low stakes at the beginning, but by the end, 20th level, which could take years for them to achieve, they're making decisions and carrying out actions that can destroy worlds. And in a well-designed and a well-played game, ideally, the players see the consequences of their actions. Up till now, I've said it's been positive, but it can also be, my goodness, because you killed that entire nest of goblins, it has changed the local power dynamic, and now a criminal organization has moved in to seize the same territory that the goblins have occupied. So what are you going to do about this criminal organization now? And moving all the way up, and now level 20, because of your action, an entire world has been destroyed. All to take out one evil wizard, you've killed millions of innocent bystanders by doing so. When you do negative consequences, certainly good consequences feel good, but negative, and you look at players in the face and they go, oh my goodness, what did we just do? Sticks with the character, but it also, the players will remember that when they come out. I'll put it this way. I mentor inmates using games and allowing them to think about the consequences of their actions. And they say by playing role-playing games, it gives them a better personal sense of responsibility that this is a safe space where I'm practicing decisions where I don't want to make the same mistakes that I made in real life. And I can make a mistake in the game and recover from it. And that lesson sticks when you come out.
Wow, that is powerful. That's a really great way to translate that, because I think it's hard for people to think, well, how does a game make any difference to my actual life? So let's go a little deeper into the political realm then. And how can the campaign narratives that you use and decision-making in Dungeons & Dragons be compared to the strategic maneuvering and policy making that we see in U.S. politics?
Okay. So I want to make two different level links here. The first is, let's say you're a level 5 character. That is the level, I would argue, that you as a character are carrying out local political action that actually affects local politics. This is, now perhaps you are on the town council, or you're on the Parent Teachers Association or the local school board or something like that. So you're wielding enough power that your decisions are going to be affecting real people. So that's level 5. Actually, level 20, that's probably your president of the entire earth. So I'm going to dial it down a little bit. So maybe level 12 or so, level 15. Remember, it's exponential. So 5 is local. By 10, you're a senator or a president or something like that. Now, in the game, you're making decisions that will influence an entire kingdom. And, dare I say, multiple kingdoms. Because now it's not just about framing it as U.S. politics, but you're making decisions that how is it affecting our foreign policy? I just made a decision that made the state next to us really, really angry. Are they going to invade now? Or is there going to be some sort of power vacuum that I've created?
In what ways do the character alignment and the faction dynamics in D&D mirror political divides and partisan groups within the U.S.?
That's an interesting question, because I would argue that prior to the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and now we're on edition 5.5, the alignments were framed as having a heavy moral component. That if you're playing an evil character, you're expected to be the villain, like twisting your mustache and running over people with trains and whatnot, and that you were carrying out what we would, as a culture, consider evil and immoral acts, versus the good character is the one who's rescuing people or making an area of the world safer.
Mm-hmm.
So, framed through older rule sets, you now might paint the different sides of the political spectrum as being morally evil and morally good. And they're making decisions that are both objectively and subjectively evil. Modern rules would say the alignment is not as important as the motivation of either the character you're playing or the non-player characters you're interacting with. So instead of saying that big green orc is evil because they're morally evil and they were born that way, it's no, as a culture, they might have teaching of like we value aggression as a culture, and so it's not they're being evil by attacking people. They value aggression and having a warrior culture. So framed in that way, now it gives you a better lens to analyze this political spectrum. Like, what are the motivations of both candidates and voters, as opposed to putting it in a moral frame? And if you understand motivations, I would say that gives you a better platform for dialogue and negotiation.
Can we just make everybody's required to play Dungeons and Dragons before
Yeah.
before the Thanksgiving
Yeah.
talking politics with their families?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about the players, but how might the role of the dungeon master, who kind of narrates the game and leads the process in guiding a campaign, to be analogous to the role of political leaders in shaping national discourse and policy?
Depending on the viewpoint you take on what the responsibilities of dungeon master are, is going to change the question in some way. So my view is a dungeon master should provide what are called guardrails without having a railroad. So by the guardrails, basically you're shaping the narrative in some way that you're trying to convince players not to do something totally foolhardy and rash that breaks the game. Railroading, on the other hand, that is now you're trying to guide the players to reach a certain decision that you want. Railroading, in my assessment, is not good gameplay. When players feel like they're being guided to an outcome that they have no choice in avoiding, that takes away their agency and they don't feel satisfied. But if you have guardrails, players now get a better sense of, to have a good story, we should contain it in some way, but it still gives us a huge playground on where to make decisions and feel like our choices matter.
Can the way that players negotiate and form alliances, as we talked about, and resolve conflicts in D&D offer insights into political candidates and parties and how they interact and collaborate in the U.S. political system?
Yes. In a way, the way Dungeons & Dragons is designed, and several other role-playing games I can think of off the top of my head, encourage players to play good characters. Now, it's not so much about a moral standpoint, but the motivations you have, and because of those motivations, these are the kind of decisions you make. By having a table of good players, they are more likely to cooperate with each other to overcome a challenge because their goals roughly align, and they realize it's better for us to work together to overcome the challenge than be at odds with each other. You will have players who want to play the evil character, the one who's maybe very self-centered, or I'm just in it for me. But looking at the literature, if you have, let's say, 3 good characters and one player playing an evil character, there's usually now discord at the table. Certainly the player is trying to role play that character, but then it has an effect on how the players perceive the game, as in, this character is ruining our fun because now they're at odds with their goals. So the end, either the player eventually leaves and stops playing, or they end up getting kind of rolled back in the fold in some way to say, hey, we know you have self-motivated interests, but can we work together to overcome this? And we can feel good about our decision, and you can get all the loot that you want. You can have tables though where they all say we all want to play evil characters. So now you have like, in fact, there are like role playing games, like settings that are designed to accommodate, like we're all playing a bunch of thieves that we're all just in it for the loot, and that's fine. But as long as the table is in agreement with each other, but still the same outcome is that in the game you should be working together to overcome a goal. If you're at odds with each other, you don't achieve anything. So the lesson for both a table of good players, middle of the road, table of neutral players, and a table of evil players is that we're learning to negotiate in order to overcome a challenge. And that lesson sticks. You come out of the table, oh, I learned how to negotiate with other people. And it worked, and we overcame a challenge.
How do themes of power, leadership, and governance in D&D kind of reflect broader concerns and, as you mentioned, debates within the current U.S. political climate?
I would argue that it points to showing how much your power is related to the potential consequences. The more power you have, the more awesomeness you can do, and the more destructiveness you could cause. So by framing U.S. politics through the lens of levels in Dungeons and Dragons, you could say locally we can see discord in, say, Fort Collins or Loveland or Denver, and see, people who have different levels of power, and that power dynamic is playing out in such a way that it's either making the majority happy or making a lot of people really angry by the decision making. Fast forward to now, again, the presidential level, national level politics. You can see the fear of people saying, I'm worried about what this 15th level character is going to do to my personal life. So you sense a bunch of first level characters now have real fear that now I don't have, my agency has been taken away because of a 15th level character.
So I'm wondering, when you talk about this with people, or you talk about this with your students,
Yes.
what is their reaction? Are their minds blown like my mind is blown right now?
Yes, very often. Like if I have a standard talk I give about the dynamics of how games work, and most people have never heard it before, and they don't realize what those dynamics are when they actually see them. I explain it to them. They don't realize how powerful games are. Like games can be absolutely transformative. If you take games away from humans, it's a fundamental part of our humanity, playing games. You'll see, certainly you'll see play in other animals, but humans, it's like how we transmit culture to each other. And many people, they're kicking that soccer ball around or throwing the football or playing a deck of cards. I feel bad. I'm making like the average 0 level character feel bad. The dynamics aren't readily apparent. But then when you tell them like, whoa, I didn't think of it that way before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we should have a mandate that all politicians should be required to play Dungeons and Dragons before they take office.
Oh, that would be pretty awesome. Actually, there is a documentary called War Game, and it's a film of people playing a national level political conflict game. And it's basically they're playing, it's not exactly Dungeons and Dragons, it's the same kind of concept, but now you're just watching regular people play and see, now you're giving them power like a president. What do they do with it? And the realization as the documentary goes on how stressful it is in reality. And truth is stranger in fiction, in that I do professional wargaming as well. And you do have senior level officials who play war games first with counterparts to kind of think through problems before they actually make a decision. And they, again, tapping into the magic circle, they will start feeling the same stresses in this game that they will feel in real life. And then they come out of it feeling more confident, and that lesson sticks with them.
With things like video games, because we've got a lot of military operations can be done on a screen. You can send a bomb from a screen, and it has that same video game aspect. Yes. I'm wondering, because that's what people think of when they think of the gamification of war. How does that kind of translate?
Okay, so I'm going to divide this into two. The first part is just the war game. We're practicing something, but there's no consequence. But if it's done right, the players have a very, very painful realization of the consequences of a mistake. So they carry on an order that they realize, oh my goodness, I just killed 500 civilians. Inside the magic circle, it feels like they've killed 500 civilians. So a well-played professional war game will leave players with the same physiological reactions as if they made a huge blunder that just did an enormous amount of damage. I certainly have cynics who would say, why is the military playing games? They hear the word game and they think it's child's play. It is absolutely not child's play. My favorite example is from a strategic level war game in around 1983 or so, where you had high-level Department of Defense officials and State Department officials playing in a nuclear deterrence game. And when it came to the time where the person playing the president had to make a decision on whether to launch nuclear weapons and had his finger over the button, and when the referee told him, if you launch that missile, it's going to kill 25 million people, the player basically had a nervous breakdown, sweating, pouring out of him, hyperventilating, shaking all over, and had to be immediately taken out of the game and debriefed. And he said he really felt like he was about to kill 25 million people. That's how intense it can be. Now, that's just inside the game. Now, the actual, and I certainly have experience with this. Again, I was in the military from 1994 to 2019, and I saw the transition to the use of more unmanned vehicles and live video and moving map screens. I will say that in the military, we did not see it as a game. We would see the moving map indicator of an aircraft. We would know a bomb was dropped. We would know that it killed people. And then we get the battle damage assessment definitively offering evidence of the deaths. And so we knew, like, this is not, yes, it's all on screen, but there's real people dying in this. And I certainly, during my later time in my service, hearing debriefs of young airmen working at different locations in the U.S., working with weaponized unmanned vehicles, and actually being involved in eliminating targets and seeing it with their own eyes. They're also experiencing PTSD because they're having difficulty separating. I literally just drove to work today, watched someone die, signed off of work, and then went back home and had dinner with my family. And so there's now this huge difficulty separating what looks like to an outside observer looks like a game, but to them this is not a game yet. I'm not in a combat zone doing it.
That kind of leads to one of the questions that I was thinking about. Can the moral and ethical dilemmas faced by characters in D&D provide a lens through which we view, and we've talked about this, the ethical consequences and controversies surrounding political candidates, their platforms, and the broader picture?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You will have players that will make decisions in the game thinking that, they're thinking short term, like here's my tactical situation, how do I solve it? And then later the dungeon master might say, well, because you did X, Y happened. And Y is a lot worse than what X was. So now what are you going to do about that? By, again, taking out that goblin's nest over here, criminal organization moves in. Oh, by the way, now you've been away from this region for a while. The criminal organization went in and massacred an entire town. Oh, and I'm not just telling you as a dungeon master, they massacred the town. You find out by coming to the town and finding the remains of the townspeople, scattered bones everywhere, and the house is burned down. And this is that kind of moment where the players are looking at each other like, oh, goodness, what do we just do? And what's also an interesting finding in the literature is you will also find players who will play evil characters carry out atrocities in the game. But then when they come out as a player, they don't feel good about themselves. They feel unclean. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. And so, yes, that sends a very powerful message.
I'm wondering, as we've mentioned, this is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think when it was started, when the creators made this game, that they had any concept that there was such a link to this larger sense of agency and this larger role that it could play? Not to make a pun there, but
Yes.
role that it could play in our lives.
Yeah. Oh, they absolutely did not. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, they were just they were. I mean, it actually did come from entertainment war games. It originated in tabletop war games, or you're moving units around the table, and then I'm highly simplifying this history to D&D here, and mixing and matching a little bit. But the realization, hey, we can actually give character attributes to this unit, and we can make this unit an individual. So now if someone's playing a character, and since we're both fans of science fiction and fantasy, let's have them, instead of fighting other people in a war, let's have them fight these fantastical creatures, but now they're representing people. And they had a sense that they were onto something when they printed up their first 1,000 copies of Dungeons and Dragons, and it just metastasized into this, what started with 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, and it tapped into this. Well, I'll put it this way. In all of human history, very, very few games have been created. Like you might say football, basketball, baseball, but you could say, okay, that is the idea of a kinetic sport. Or poker, spades, hearts, that's cards. Prior to Dungeons and Dragons, there were only about 6 or 7 genres of games that had ever been created in all of human history. What they did not know at the time is they created a brand new game that had never existed before. So that is, when I say Dungeons and Dragons was the first commercial role-playing game, it was actually a historic moment. It changed human culture when they did that. So it was transformative, but they didn't know it at the time. They just thought it was fun.
Do you think a lot of politicians are playing games, or are they have they had game experience, or are you seeing that kind of impact at all? I mean, Dungeons and Dragons has been around for a long time, so maybe we've got some gamers in there.
So, nationally, I maybe I'm being unfair just from my own observation, is that there's still a sense that like only nerds or freaks or geeks play games, and in older generations, like remembering the Satanic Panic from the 1980s and associating Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games with like immorality, without realizing that no, most players are playing good, overcoming evil, not evil overcoming good. But again, I'm making a moral statement there. So I haven't seen it much in national level, but speaking in Colorado, Governor Polis, hopefully he listens to this podcast and I can play a game with him. He is an avid Dungeons and Dragons player.
Really?
I have friends in the larger Denver, Fort Collins gaming community who say, yes, they remember playing with him when he was younger. So he has, I almost want to interview him to say, what lessons did you learn at the gaming table that you say, whoa, it really has actually influenced my outlook on how I interact with people.
All right, Polis, the ball is in your court now. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you.
That was CSU political science instructor James Pigeon Fielder talking about the valuable political strategies found in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. I'm your host, Stacey Nick, and you're listening to CSU's The Audit.